Hello, my Facebook friends and Instagram friends, and everyone else, everywhere else we're on social media. So I'm excited about thought shifting Thursdays today. I want to explore this relationship between positive thinking and emotional healing, and really what inspired me to look at this is, I'm just looking at my own life and noticing how during COVID and other challenges in my life, how I'm seem to be able to stay positive and to be in a place of peace for the most part. Not 100%. I'm not perfect in that way. I'm not totally enlightened. I have issues, and yet, for the most part, I remain at peace no matter what's going on. Certainly, a meditation practice has a lot to do with that. But in examining how I've arrived at this place of consistent inner peace and feeling joy even in the midst of challenge, I've noticed some things. I've kind of broken it down, and that's what I want to share with you today. And so, first off, let me define joy for you again. Joy, as I understand it, is not just the opposite of sadness. That's happiness. That's a personal experience. So when I talk about joy, I'm talking about a pervasive spiritual quality that can actually be present even in moments of grief, even in moments of sorrow or challenge or even anger. And so synonymous with the spiritual joy of which I'm talking about is deep inner peace, is connectivity, right? So that's all I wanted to say about that. But so what I've noticed, and this is kind of the path that I took, most people who get into positive thinking or a path of self-help or new thought or what we might call a spiritual path begin by coming across some kind of information, literature, practices around positive thinking. And they start applying these practices, as I did early in my 20s. And we instantly, almost everyone instantly notices positive changes in their life simply by changing your thinking, change your life, right? It's a common phrasing of it. And so we go along this path and things are getting better in our life. But we reach a plateau where we can't go any further until we kind of dive into the emotional side of it or the shadow self. We can't continue to evolve just by doing it by changing our thoughts or in a mental way, right? And so then we start coming across other practices that help us to go into our emotional nature and to heal it. And I'll tell you about my personal path there. So I started out meditating when I was 18, and then I found New Thought and Science of Mind when I was in my early 20s, around 23 years old, and I went through a 5-year program in training, and that's how I became licensed and then ordained as a New Thought or Science of Mind minister. And but through all of that training, at that point in Science of Mind and New Thought, there weren't any teachings or techniques or practices around emotional healing. It was all about the mind. It's evolved, and the good thing about New Thought is it brings in new practices and concepts and so on. And so now today, there's a great deal of practices and techniques. And in fact, my book, The Magic of the Soul, has been embraced by Science of Mind, Centers for Spiritual Living, because it has a lot of teachings and practices from spiritual psychology, of which I went into when I didn't find any of these techniques or tools in New Thought at the time. And so then I trained for 4 years in spiritual psychology, psychosynthesis specifically, to gain access to techniques and practices in emotional healing and shadow work. And so that's how it works for most people. So then we find these techniques and then we dive deep into what Jung called that deep well that everyone must go down through in order to know themselves. In fact, I'm going to read from you a quote from Carl Jung about this from my book, The Magic of the Soul, on page 131. And I'll read the preamble to that how I introduce it. So we all have a dark side or shadow self that contains our hatreds, prejudices, judgments, resistances, cruelties, jealousies, fears, and angers or rage. We come face to face with our shadow at different points in our lives through feedback from others, deep self-reflection, or messages from our dreams. Because of the propensity of the ego to present the self-image in the most favorable light, we may often discount or deny the shadow in these instances. If we open to our shadow self, however, we come to know ourselves at a truly deep level. Carl Jung went so far as to suggest that our entrance into the social unconscious, our connection to everyone and everything, can be through the narrow door of the shadow as illustrated in this passage, which I love. The meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow. The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down the deep well. But one must learn to know oneself in order to know who one is. For what comes after the door is, surprisingly, a boundless expanse full of unprecedented uncertainty, with apparently no inside and no outside, no above and no below, no here and no there, no mine and no thine, no good and no bad. It is the world of water, where all life floats in suspension, where the realm of the sympathetic system, the soul of everything living, begins, where I am invisibly this and invisibly that, where I experience the other in myself and the other than myself experiences me. That's a lot to unpack, right? So Jung's description of meeting the shadow is as profound as the most, enlightened or the clearest expression of or description of enlightenment, right? So whether you are moving toward the light or whether you are diving into the richness of the darkness within ourselves, we end up at the same place. So another way of saying this is, we can only go down that the path of positivity for, so far before we must experience the shadow. The way it was described to me once when I was by a classmate of mine in my spiritual psychology classes is the brighter the light becomes. So if I shine a light on, this book, right? If I shine a light on it, and it creates a shadow, you can't really see a shadow from this, but let's say it creates a shadow right here behind it. The brighter the light becomes, actually, maybe the book is creating a shadow on my hand. Not exactly. But the brighter the light becomes, the more pronounced the shadow becomes on my hand. So what happens then is if we're going down this path of light, the shadow just gets more and more pronounced, and it just gets in our face more and more. And so ultimately I must face that shadow in order to go further into the light. And so this is my experience then, is having gone through first this positivity kind of training, and then this deep emotional healing that I've gone through in my experience and evolution of consciousness. What I come out of the other end after going through the shadow and experiencing the negativity, as as I described in the preamble to that Jung quote, the fears, the anger, the prejudice, all of this, as I dive into that, then when I come through that, I come to a higher level of positivity, a more holistic level of positivity that actually includes or embraces all of the shadow stuff, the angers, the hurts, the sadness. And so, and in that, there's also a higher level then of embracing everything that is. So in that first stage of positivity, I tend to resist anything that is not positive. In this more holistic experience of positivity, then I can embrace everything. And so, some people start from the opposite place. They may start by exploring their emotions and doing emotional healing, and then can only go so far with that until they bring in the positivity. But no matter where you start, having gone through both of those stages, we end up in this more holistic and more balanced and whole experience of life that can bring us to a level of positivity that can embrace things like the pandemic that seems to be getting worse, right? And so and the reason I wanted to explore all of this with you today is because I see so many people being off center, right? And having a hard time with the challenges that we're experiencing. Now, the reason I'm not having such a hard time is, A, I'm not experiencing a lot of, financial challenge in this time. I'm not experiencing a lot of relationship challenge. I have this amazing relationship with my beloved, my wife, who's, on this, who's viewing this right now. And so my heart goes out to those people who are challenged in those areas. But I also know that if I was challenged in these areas, I would still be at a high level of positivity around all of it, having gone through the practices that I've gone through and the evolution of my emotional nature, the evolution of my thought processes that I've gone through. So, because I have been challenged in these areas. I've gone through divorces. I've gone through, physical challenges, health challenges. I've gone through chronic illnesses. I've gone through life-threatening illnesses and come out the other side. And I've gone through financial hardships. And through all of these things, I've remained at a high level of positivity for the most part, and more so now than ever before. And what has occurred to me in preparing for this sharing with you is that, maybe to some degree, to a high degree, in fact, it's not that, it's less that, I'm not being challenged in these areas, or that the challenge in these areas is not there, not just because I'm not experiencing emotional challenge in these areas because I'm not having challenges. I'm not having challenges because of the evolution of consciousness. So another way of presenting this is, Michael Beckwith came up with this many decades ago, actually, and that is the 4 stages of positive growth. The 4 stages of spiritual growth. He used to call it the 4 kingdoms of consciousness. And so I'm going to give you those 4 kingdoms just to present this in a different way. And so the first stage of spiritual growth is life happens to me, right? That's when I have victim consciousness, when, before I'm on a spiritual path, when I just see that everything that's happened, this pandemic, the political challenges that are going on, health challenges that I may have, financial challenges I may have, are all about things that I can't control. And then the second level is where, or kingdom of consciousness, is where I recognize now that that life happens by me. That's when I get into this positive thinking, and I tend to see that, wow, by practicing consciousness and positive thinking, I can actually affect the world. And then I start to be able to manipulate things and be able to change my reality through my thinking. And then again, I can only get so far by doing that. And then the third stage is life happens through me, right? And now I start to surrender. And this stage can involve an emotional healing where I go deeper, as I was speaking before, into the shadow self. And through that kind of healing and through the surrendering process, then I recognize it's more than just manipulating things and having my consciousness affect things. But in the surrendering process, then I recognize that it's not just about me creating things, it's about life happening through me. It's about surrendering and recognizing that this is this higher power. And what comes into that then is also a level of non-attachment, because I recognize, that prayer, the serenity prayer. Let's see if I remember the words to it exactly. I change the things that I can, I accept the things that I can't, and I have the wisdom to know the difference between those two. So that's this holistic approach. And where that leads as I get better and better into this is the fourth stage, where life happens as me, where there is, to at least some degree, this deep understanding, and not only mental understanding, but emotional understanding, heart understanding, that I am one with everything. And at that level, as I begin to tap into that, I recognize that the pandemic, that the economy, that my own economy, that my own physical health, that everything that is happening is actually happening for me and happening for us and for the world. That everything is leading to a higher expression of the evolution of consciousness, which simply means a higher vibration of love. And so I can see and I can have compassion for the suffering that's happening in the world, and at the same time I can recognize that there's a master plan behind all of this. And so that's how I can remain at a place of peace. So, it's important to recognize that whatever stage I'm in is the perfect place to be. And so if I'm developing positivity in my life, that's excellent. But I may come to a plateau in dealing with a pandemic and the isolation that some people are dealing with, where I'm required now to bring in this other stage of emotional healing and to do the deeper shadow work. And maybe in next Thursday, because I don't want to overload you with too much information here, we'll do some deep dive into emotional healing. Because I think that's where a lot of people land in this, is they've got a lot of done a lot of self-growth in positivity, but are being called at this time, whether you've done emotional healing or not, to go deeper into that emotional healing. But then again, for some people, you may have done a lot of emotional healing, but it's time to bring in a higher level of positive thinking. And so as we get to that third phase, and look, if none of those things are doing it for you and you're still feeling a lot of pain and sorrow and challenge and fear in these times, then if nothing else works, just try surrender. When I've gotten to those places in my life where I don't have a solution, then the only place left to go is to simply surrender. Surrender to a higher power. Know that Spirit has this. And by the way, way of framing that may be quite comical to a degree is, look, if I surrender to Spirit and just hand it all over to Spirit, and it doesn't work out, that's on Spirit, not on me, right? So just try that. If nothing else is helping you, then just surrender. Just turn it all over and trust that requires a high level of trust and faith. And that is what comes in that third kingdom of consciousness, is life happens through me. And it can't happen through me unless I am willing to surrender and allow Spirit to come into me and to embody that, right? And getting really good at that level of surrender, the better I get at that, the more non-attached I become to circumstances in the world of form, and the more that I then can eventually, if not right now, surrender into that place that opens me to Spirit as me, that there is no separation, that I am one. And look, we can be in every one of these levels of consciousness in one day. You know, I can go through these levels in one day. Something happens that I don't like, that really challenges me. I might, for an instant, go back to victim consciousness. Why is this happening to me? Now, because of my spiritual practice, I will very quickly recognize, oh, I have responsibility for this. Stage 2. I can surrender into this. Stage 3. And ultimately, I come back to this place that I am one with everything. Everything is happening for me and for everyone to evolve this expression of consciousness and love. So, all right, let's do a little meditative practice with this that can hopefully embody all that I've been sharing here today. And, you know, I invite you to make comments, and I will personally, you know, respond to your comments that you leave on Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media you may be accessing this through. And again, I don't always offer this, but I'll offer it today because this is a really important important share that I feel I'm sharing with you today. So if you'd like to receive a complimentary coaching session, and if I get too many requests, which I usually don't through these social media sharings, then we'll set up a time, and if I can't find a time for you, then we'll set it up with one of the life coaches that have embodied these same principles that I'm talking about, that can support you in whatever process or whatever stage you're in at this very moment in time. And it's not a hierarchy, you know, it's not about, you know, being in one stage or another, because wherever we are, as I said, is the perfect place to be. And we're all, you know, I could have something happen tomorrow that brings me back to stage 1. So it's all about supporting ourselves wherever we are and just doing whatever is right for us at this moment in time. So close your eyes and let's just see what emerges here. I haven't planned anything about this, but let's all just take a nice deep healing breath and maybe make that assessment. What is the most important thing for me to do? And maybe it's D, all of the above. Perhaps it is to bring more positivity into my life. And so one very simple practice is wake up in the morning and just simply affirm. No matter what the challenges today will bring, today is going to be a positive experience for me. I am going to be in gratitude today. Today is going to be a magical today. Whatever is the right affirmation for you. You know, when people are having an ongoing experience of challenge, just to wake up in the morning and create this affirmation first thing can make a huge difference. Maybe it's to dive deep into emotional healing. And what that can mean is to simply allow myself to have a cry, allow myself to scream out the anger, allow myself to dive deep into that shadow self. And it's very, very important for it to be a holistic experience when I do this emotional work, to bring the positivity into it as well. As soon as I do this emotional release of pain, of fear, of anger, then to bring the positivity in. And the way to do that is, let's say I'm crying for a while, to to allow the healing, the expression of my emotional nature. As soon as I notice that there is a completion here, and one way to tell that is there's a sigh, there's a deep breath. Okay, I have released something here. Now bring in the positivity, the affirmation, the light and love. So perhaps it is perhaps the most appropriate. Maybe it's after doing those two practices to then just surrender. Or perhaps it's even to start with surrender. Assess what is right for you, the most important practice at this time. Perhaps if you're not meditating regularly, I find it amazing, and I've seen this in my own life in the past and for my clients. So oftentimes when people are challenged the most, they give up their meditation practice. They give up eating healthy because it just seems like it's too much at this time. And we go into comfort, rather than doing what really we know from an intuitive level, from a higher self level, through the eyes of our soul, the perspective of the larger picture. What is most healthy for me? So inviting and re-experiencing the healthy practices that I know work for me. And perhaps for some people it's all of the above, and moving into this consciousness of non-attachment and recognizing that everything is for me all the time. I am one with everything, so there is nothing that can be against me. And maybe choose one of these right now, or again, all of the above, and just dive deep into it. The positivity, the emotional healing. As we conclude this presentation, to go into one of these, to just cry for a while, to scream for a while, to bring in the positive thinking, to surrender. Let's just go into surrender right now, because that can apply in every one of these. Turning it all over to Spirit, letting it go. As soon as we surrender, the light and love cannot help but flood in. And this is in this consciousness of surrender, always comes this deeper level of trust, faith, of knowing that everything is going to turn out all right in the end. So I'll end with this phrasing that's coming to me right now, and it's an old Indian expression that if you watch the movie My Favorite Marigold, Exotic Marigold Hotel, it came out in the dialogue in that, and that is with a somewhat I'll try my Indian accent here, and that is, everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not yet the end. Trust that, my friend. And so, love you. Love to connect with you in whatever way you'd like to connect with me. And we'll say goodbye for now. And let's raise the vibration of love and positivity in whatever way is appropriate for you at this time. All right, take care, my friends, and we'll see you next week. Noon on Thursdays. Thought Shifting Thursdays. Love sharing with you.